Good morning, everyone. Good to see you again. I'd like to reconvene the May 2019 Committee on Accreditation meeting. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Jose Luis Alvarado, Cynthia Amos, Jomeline Belatayo, Suzanne Borges, Kathy Krecia, Katrine Chkowski, Deborah Erickson, Cheryl Forbes, Bob Fraley,
Present.
Anna Moore, Gerard Morrison, Iris Riggs. We have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Cheryl Forbes for sitting in for me yesterday. Thank you so much for running things, and bravo. No, I heard it went well, really well. Yeah, you're doing great. And this morning, sitting in for Co-Chair Moore, we have Suzanne Borges. Suzanne, welcome in the chair. Thank you. All right, so this morning's schedule is we have some time certains. There's some flexibility because it's a pretty wide open schedule, but we're trying to move things, and if we can, move things more forward. But we'll start with item 26, which is the discussion of potential handbook changes. Administrator Cheryl Hickey and Terry Clark will present this item. Ms. Clark, would you like to begin?
Good morning. This is going to be a big item. It's starting today. We're going to need to take a couple conversations on this, and then we're actually going to need to think about the regulatory process. Something that became clear to us over the last month or so is that the handbook by itself is not enforceable. You need to put actually things into regulation to make them enforceable. And in addition to that fact, the handbook is not as clear as we would like it in many places. And we've identified a number of them for you in this agenda item. And as Cheryl and I were talking this morning, as time allows during the day, we would like to be able to revisit this item and actually even have you open handbook chapters, skim the chapter, and help us identify areas where the handbook is not as clear as we need it to be. You'll see in number 1 here, and this is an important one. The handbook, even though we all know, and we've always talked about at the table, that the handbook is for your guidance only, it actually doesn't really clearly state that in the handbook, which means when other people external to the COA read the handbook and they read something in the handbook of this is what will happen, they think that is the only time that will happen. So we know we need a lot more description and definition of what it means to be a Committee on Accreditation, what the committee may do, and that you are all placed on the committee by the commission because you are exemplary educators and your professional judgment is what is being used here. That is not clearly articulated at all, and we're working on a draft for that to bring back to you in June, hopefully, which would go into one of the early type chapters. That's number 1 on there. The second one has to do with closure of a program. And remember that closure of a program didn't used to exist in the COA. And then as the accreditation system has been revised and updated, that started, there might be a time where a specific program needs to be told you must close. Unfortunately, the language in the handbook right now says when less than half of the standards have been met. And it doesn't really make it clear enough that that is an example of when you might choose to close a program, that there would be other instances where you might want to close a program. And that ran into some issues with us recently. Another area we learned about was preconditions. That preconditions are referenced multiple times in the handbook, but it is not as clear as we all understand it to be that preconditions are those foundational legal requirements that must be in effect at all times for any program to be able to operate. We need more clear language on that topic in the handbook. We know that for absolute certainty. Number 4, we started to talk about a little bit yesterday, late documents, due dates, extensions, things like that. That is not anywhere near clear in the handbook either. For years, we've always been kind of chasing down documents at times. And one of the reasons the accreditation system was redesigned the way it was consultants used to spend a whole lot of that year up to the visit trying to get a common standards document out of their institution. And if they got it 60 days out, they were thrilled. And when it's 30 days or 2 weeks and it just wasn't working well. And so a lot of the things that the commission has put in place, such as preconditions in years 1 and 4, program review, and then common standard review in year 5, have really helped in that a lot. But there still needs to be greater specificity. And not that we have to put the exact due date, but the language about documents submissions are due on the specified due date, and when they're not in by that date, what can happen? You've been having now for over a year those agenda items on late documents. It's still a little nebulous. What can you do about late documents? And so when the same institution appears there 3 meetings in a row because they're still late, really what you've kind of been stuck with is Cheryl can craft a letter on your behalf and send a letter saying, we really need your document. Now, we need it now. But that's all you're allowed to do. One of the areas where we know through regulations something very specific that is very effective happens is if annual accreditation fees have not been paid. Those are due. The bills go out August 1st. They're due. And if they are not paid by midnight on October 31st, on November 1st, that institution's ability to submit recommendations for credentials gets turned off. That's only allowed to happen because it says that this will happen in regulations. So we need to think about what are the appropriate staggered steps of what happens. The first is maybe an email, but what happens next? And then if there's something that really is going to happen that impacts them, such as they may not submit credential recommendations, it's going to have to be put into regulatory language. So thinking about what would be the graduated steps you want staff to be able to take with an institution when things are not being submitted in a timely manner, that kind of idea.
We had an agenda item on that last time. It needs to be incorporated into the
Perfect,
handbook.
Yes. Now that I'm not here at all the meetings for the whole meeting, I sometimes lose track of what you guys have done because I'm here at the meeting, the parts that Cheryl says you need to be here, and here. So we really kind of wanted to have a general conversation as this opening time for this item about these ideas. Do you agree with the ones that are here? What additional things might you have thought about? And then as time does allow, in between time certain things, we would pull up specific handbook chapters. Chapter 1 is probably not when we're going to pull up. It's one of the basic ones. But when we get into the 6, 7s, and 8s, where it's about, what do you do to prepare for a visit? What can the committee do? Those kinds of things. We really would like to spend some time in those chapters and give you a little chance to read and make some notes and then give us some feedback. Does this make sense? I'm turning it back to the co-chair to call on committee members because I think we've primed and they're ready.
Committee Member Alvarado.
So as the handbook is being revised, are you thinking of including the item that we discussed yesterday with regards to sort of preliminary program approval and then having some sort of midpoint check? And if so, then we need to make sure this gets embedded within the new handbook.
Definitely once there's been a decision made on how that can happen. I've been reflecting on this idea of this provisional program approval. And I think we definitely have to deal with regulations on that once you're sure you know what you want. And I think it's probably likely because the only body that can promulgate regulations is the commission. So the commission is going to need to get an item on this new idea. They're going to have to agree, yes, this is what we want to do, which I think they will probably be pretty supportive of that idea because I think they're happy with this provisional institutional approval and they get to monitor. And so once they agree and we can promulgate regulations, yes, that definitely would be added to the handbook. So I'm sure Cheryl's already written that one down, knowing Cheryl.
Just a point of clarification, it's more than just provisional institutional program approval, right?
Definitely, yes. Yes, I agree.
Any other committee member?
Learned through this whole thing is how many more regulations we need to promulgate, like on everything. Because if we're ever challenged on any piece of it, things that I think are clear, like your ability to be flexible, I think are stated several times in the handbook. However, they're not in, I guess, some key places that it could be construed that it's contrary to another page in the book or something. It's almost like we have to overdo it in the handbook and state things many, many times and make sure that what's stated is consistently stated across. So, yeah.
I want to take back something I already said this morning. I said maybe those early chapters we don't need to look at, whereas chapter 1 is the responsibilities of the commission and the responsibilities of the COA. I think that's the perfect chapter where we need to have a very complete conversation about the purpose of the committee, and how the committee is guided by everything in the handbook and is held to the framework, but the committee's professional judgment. And our legal division uses things like aggravating factors and ameliorating factors, which I think is a pretty legalese type word, but maybe it's something we need to put in here, because when we have external people, the public, look at things and say, well, it says this leads to this, leads to this. We need to have a language, I think, in Chapter 1 that talks about aggravating factors could include things as a pattern of not meeting deadlines, preconditions that are not met, things like that need to be clearly laid out, I think, in Chapter 1 about your ability to look at those and to therefore impose what seems to be more harsh stipulation than what would be normally in the table.
Well, we have some time now. Do we want to delve into it now, or do we have the 9 o'clock here we want to begin? What's your preference, Cheryl? Sure, absolutely. Committee Member Riggs.
I don't know if this fits in the handbook or if this is too nitty gritty, but just thinking about online programs and programs that are all over the state and all of the things that relate to some of the issues that have arisen for us, and whether or not there are guidelines for that. Do those go elsewhere? Do they go into the handbook? That's one question. And then also just looking to the future as we have more and more intern programs being offered by districts and county offices of education. And maybe those just go in the program standards for intern programs, but trying to prevent some difficult issues where county offices, for example, are trying to serve all of their schools, including charters, and some of those charters don't really meet the requirements for candidates being able to demonstrate what is required by the standards. So I don't want those folks to come to this table and be told after the fact that you've been placing people in charters that are independent, doing independent study packets, or your people are teaching parents rather than teachers, and find that we haven't been doing the right thing. So that probably goes in the program standards more overtly. I don't know.
I have been reflecting on that, because that is a piece that's bothered me about this in the last month or so, is the idea that some charters may be or some schools, I should say, may be so specific. They're very personalized. The candidate may never get in front of a classroom of 35 kids. I don't know that that's adequate preparation for a license to teach in California. Personally, I'm saying that personally. And maybe we need to look at the standards one more time to make sure we didn't streamline so much that we left out some of those things that are critical. I think that's part of this discussion. I mean, we would have to recommend that to the commission, because the commission has the purview to change standards. But there are some things that we think about and we went, maybe we went too far in streamlining.
Member Amos.
To elaborate on what Cheryl was saying, it seems like with these different, as education institutions change, like the charters and other types of alternate types of induction programs seem to be springing up, perhaps we can look at our program standards and address those types of programs to ensure that the standards and our expectations, and the education code is in play with those alternate types of induction programs, because oftentimes they are exempt from certain parts of the education code. And so it seems like the rule of thought with them is, well, if I'm exempt from this part, then I'm exempt from this part. And that seems like where they run into difficulty when they come before us. And our interpretation is you're not exempt from that part, so perhaps we could look at that as well.
Certainly clarify, yeah. I saw some other committee member, Tchaikovsky.
So being relatively new to this business, I'm listening to this conversation and wondering, what should be the differences between the handbook and regulations? Because as I hear you talking about making the handbook content more specific, it seems to me like that pulls it more toward a set of regulations, whereas the handbook really ought to have a different purpose to me. Like one of the first things, of course, I had to read the handbook, before I showed up here. And then I'm just thinking the handbook has a much broader audience than lawyers or people who are looking to document adherence to legal requirements, right? So I don't know if there's any reason to invest some time in explaining the rationale in the handbook behind certain, albeit new, specificity in that document. Like instead of trying to take all this language and make sure they match exactly, well, then you just have like two versions of the same thing, perhaps. And again, I don't know how these things are used or not used. The intent of this rule is so-and-so. The reason why, online programs are expected to blah, blah, blah is because in California, we believe blah, blah, blah. That way there's a kind of a theory of knowledge or framework or something that undergirds all the regulations that appear over here. And that way they really talk to each other instead of just being kind of saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Clark.
Really, really good points. And I think I'm actually not implying that I think we should regulate the handbook, because I think Cheryl and I both believe that that would be impossible. Because when you work with the Office of Administrative Law, they want a definition for every term, and they want it to be something that is crystal clear. And when this body is by law supposed to reflect on professional expertise, it's hard to regulate that. The framework, I do believe, should be regulated. That is the Commission's policy document of the adoption of their policies. So what I think would be best is if you guys brainstorm, you identify holes or areas of concern, and then staff will analyze those to figure out, is that a Commission responsibility to take action on and then to implement it and add it to the framework in some way? Is it something you have the authority to make decisions on? The Ed Code is very clear about things that the committee does that the Commission doesn't do, such as the committee can evaluate standards and say, yes, these standards are equivalent. If you've met these standards, this is equivalent to this standard, which is how we work in the CAPE world to some extent, and how we work with NASP or ASHA or any of those other professional associations. So I think you're very right on that. We have to figure out how to make it clear, and in regulating the framework, maybe there's a way to regulate the statement that the framework's policies are defined, how they're to be implemented, and guidance is provided in the handbook. So we reference the handbook, but we don't actually regulate the handbook. But so your conversation, I think, could just be identify the topics you think of. We'll write them down. We'll try to figure out where it fits, who has the authority to make a decision on that topic. And then you're right. We do not want the handbook to be the same as the framework, to be the same as the regulations. They do have different audiences.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Clark. Any other committee member wish to comment at this time? Yeah, Member Riggs.
Again, this may not go where we're thinking. It just is. The whole issue of, I know we can close the program because we've done that, and I understand that's not really reflected there, but how this body thinks about when an institution has so much to address and what happens to people who are already in that program. And I'm still not clear myself as to what I can even propose in that situation. So, it's like if you've got a program with 1,000 people across the state, and this program has multiple things that are are lacking. They've not met the standards, major standards, foundational standards, and we do a lot of stuff to them. We have them do quarterly reports, and we have them respond to the preconditions right away. We do a lot of good stuff, but I'm still not really comfortable with what that institution is turning out to our schools from people who are already in a program that's basically not an approved program. And I don't know that we have an answer to that, but I'm not satisfied really with the way we're dealing with it.
And I think that's why it's being brought to our attention with the handbook. It's a lot of issues to discuss. Cheryl?
I think it's a new issue for this committee because before I don't know what the norm or the way you handled things, this committee handled things, was that an institution automatically got a year to fix things, regardless of how bad they might have been. And I think it was in an effort to, wait a second, we can't let an institution that might be defrauding, I'm just going to use that case, a student, we want to be able to, close them down immediately to stop the harm. But now we're faced with, okay, that does bring on a lot of questions about what happens to the candidates and how you deal with that. So I think it's just a newer thing that we're dealing with. And we have to kind of tease that out and try to figure out what the right thing to do is. But we always used to allow a full year, regardless of what the report looked like. So,
Would it be useful in any way to have any representatives from this body to serve as a subcommittee to assist with that? Okay. Well, now might be the time to jump forth if anybody's interested in being part of that committee. So we have, on this side, we have Member Amos, Member Crecia, and Member Tchaikovsky, and Member Riggs, and Member Alvarado.
I think we have to be a little bit careful if we get close to a quorum.
Exactly, right. I was going to say, who's not going to do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
7 is a quorum, so we need to stay underneath that. And then, of course, that group isn't making decisions for the body. It would be very clear that everything comes back to a public agendized item
Absolutely.
for decisions.
Yep. Yeah, the only thought behind that is to have some representative to talk about it in greater detail, to be able to bring something like you're saying to the body here and to your attention to discuss. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. So we will be in contact, and I don't know if is 5 sufficient. I don't think we're any more than that. Okay. Yeah. All right. Great. Thank you all for stepping forth to volunteer for that.
okay, so I have Iris, Crecia, Kelsey, and Alvarado. Is that right?
That's it. Yes. Cheryl? Okay, so you want to be on, and then Katrina, do you? Okay. Okay.
Not to further complicate.
Okay, that works. And everyone will have input. It's not a matter that it's just going to be those 5 that will make decisions. Yeah, there's be offering information to bring back to this body to discuss, and also forward on to staff for recommendations, and also for their input. That work? Okay. Cool.
See,
We have a 9 o'clock. Looks like it's William is.
so did I.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that discussion. We may come back to that later on in the day. We're going to move on to item 27. Item 27 is the report of actions taken by Notre Dame de Namur University to address stipulations. Consultant William Hattrick will present this action item, and joining him at the table is institutional representative Dr. Carol Hodges, Dean. Anyone need to recuse himself? Mr. Hattrick, will you please begin?
Good morning, committee members. This item addresses the stipulations for Notre Dame de Namur University and their 7th year follow-up report. As you remember, the site visit took place in April 2018, and at that time the team made a recommendation of accreditation with stipulations to be addressed during year 7 of the accreditation cycle. NDNU provided staff with a report and evidence on April 2nd, and based on this information, staff's recommending that the COA remove the stipulations from NDNU and to change its status from accreditation to accreditation. In the report, you'll find a full response to each stipulation with their links to evidence, and I'll just go through a brief summary on each one now. For the first stipulation related to training for site-based supervisors, NDNU held training workshops in various locations throughout the past academic year, and these will continue on each semester. Additionally, the university supervisors are meeting with the site-based supervisors to further clarify information about their role. And as outlined in the table for the second stipulation, there are multiple opportunities for candidates to demonstrate their knowledge of digital literacies and technology as specified in the TPEs. All seminars across the program use the same lesson plan template, which sets out the expectation to incorporate technology. Additional syllabi are linked which support that this stipulation is being addressed. In Stipulation 3, the team felt that candidates needed more from the program to be able to assess students across the age levels and disability categories specific to the moderate severe credential. And so to address this, NDNU revised one of its courses, and a formal evaluation of teacher effectiveness takes place at the midterm and the end of student teaching to verify the candidate's knowledge of this and other standards. And the last stipulation for that one, NDNU actually developed a new course that covers augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC, for students with moderate to severe disabilities. And this course and its assignments specifically address AAC technology, access, and implementation for those students. So that is my summary for each one. I'll turn it over to Carol to add anything else and answer any questions you may have.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. I'm not sure I have anything to add other than, again, to thank the team and William and Roxanne for their assistance during the original site visit and for the support and assistance they've provided during this year as we worked on the stipulations. So I'm open to any questions.
Yeah, Member Borges.
When I was reading through this, I'm impressed with how detailed you were with your responses to the stipulations. And I particularly like in the one agenda where you're training your consulting teachers. Remember what was your biggest problem when you were a student teacher? Talk about your master teacher. What did you like about it? I think that's very relevant. That, and then going through with the other items, you did a very detailed with documentation of all the stipulations.
Thank you. We've always used that question of going back and remembering what it was like when you student teach. We've just never been that explicit about it. And actually, that's one of my favorite discussions when we do the workshop, because regardless of how long ago it was, we all remember.
Yes.
And And I have to say, I am still in touch with my master teacher from my original student teaching when I got my single subject credential a very long time ago. She's 96.
Wow.
And we still stay in touch. I mean, she meant a lot. And I think we kind of talk about that with the master teachers, that really you can make a big difference, in where our candidates go. And if it wasn't for them, I don't think we'd turn out good teachers. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Member Alvarado.
I have a question about the implementation of the technology course and the syllabus that's attached in the report. I noticed that the course objectives are not connected in any way to either program learning outcomes or teacher performance expectations, whereas the other syllabi that are included specifically have those connections. Can you explain the reason why there's no connection there with that course?
That's a really good question. I think they're not explicitly put in there, but they're part of the course. I think we allowed it to go the way it was because of how the faculty member teaches the course, and that those were the expectations that he wanted to see in there. They are measured on how they meet those in other courses and in the student teaching. It's probably something we should change.
Thank you. Any other committee member? Okay, this is an action item. Is there a motion? A motion from a member Crescia, and your motion is to accept the recommendation, right? Seconded by committee member Amos. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Hattrick, and thank you, Dr. Hodges. Appreciate it. Do we have the 9:15 folks here? All right, Jake, you're on top of it, man. Look at that. He's ready. Okay. And we have on Zoom, we have the... So we're looking at item 28. Do we have representatives online?
Hi.
There we go. We hear you. Okay, great.
I will be here in just a minute.
So the item 28 is a report of the required 6-month report by Fremont Union High School District. Consultant Jake Schuler will introduce this item. And joining him via video are institutional representatives Josh Mazel, Coordinator of Academic Interventions, and Tom Avakum. I got this. Dang it, I had it. Avakumovitz, is that right?
It's Avakumovitz.
Oh, I even practiced it. Avakumovitz, sorry. Associate Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. Anyone need to recuse themselves? Seeing none, Mr. Schuler, please begin.
All right. Good morning, committee members. The Fremont Union High School District site visit took place in October of 2018, and at the COA meeting in November, the COA assigned the status of accreditation with stipulations, and asked for a follow-up report by May 15th. Fremont decided to go ahead and address it at this May meeting, be a little bit early on that report. There's also a one-year follow-up report, so you will hear back from them again in November to fully address how have they implemented some of the strategies they're talking about today. So I'll do a summary of the issues and the stipulations, and then also the actions that Fremont is undertaking. So the first section of the required May report focuses on how Fremont has continued to address induction preconditions 3 and 4, which were found to be out of compliance at this site visit. Induction precondition 3 is the requirement to monitor that candidates have at least 1 hour per week of support, either directly provided or coordinated by their induction mentor. And precondition 4 is the requirement that the development of goals for the ILP, the individual learning plan, take place within 60 days from the enrollment in the program. During the site visit, there were questions from the team as to whether there was a distinct process for these two preconditions, and program leadership confirmed that there wasn't a specific process at that time. In between the site visit and actually the COA in November, they already had worked on a solution to that and had been in contact with staff, and we presented those to you then. And the way that those look now, for precondition 3, there is now a mentor log spreadsheet that documents each meeting with a basic description of activities and the length of time for the meeting between the mentor and the candidate. It tracks the meetings in a way that then allows program leadership to verify each candidate is receiving the 1 hour of support per week. A comment from Fremont leadership in this report is that they believe the new process has helped them better monitor who is getting their time and consider how to provide support to their diverse caseloads in an equitable way. So for precondition 4, the requirement that goals for each for the ILP are developed within 60 days. They again have created another spreadsheet, which the first thing was to decide what day was the first day of enrollment. It made the most sense to have that be the first day of the school year. And then the spreadsheet then tracks when those goals are worked on, and again shows the leadership team to make sure that it's been done within 60 days. Okay, so that's the first stipulation, it's actually part 1A. So for part 1B, the COA asked for a report on how the induction program is gathering and using induction-specific feedback and data, that which is distinct from the support they provide for all new hires, and how the program is gathering and using this specific feedback and data from key stakeholders such as employers and community partners. You'll notice that this stipulation is very similar to the third stipulation, which is related to Common Standard 4. So some of these action items sort of apply to both stipulations. So before and at the site visit, the team found evidence that the program regularly collects and analyzes a wide variety of internal data on candidate experience and preparation and makes appropriate modifications. However, the team found no evidence that this data includes regular feedback from key stakeholders such as employers or community partners on the quality of the preparation within the induction program, as I said, is distinguished from the support for all new hires. And Josh and Tom will speak more to what that looks like to them. In their report, Fremont explained how they are working to ensure that data from key stakeholders over the next year is focused specifically on the induction program, and also increasing their engagement with employers about this specific induction feedback and with community partners. And some of those community partners include neighboring school districts and IHEs that they've had relationships with in the past, but that they're planning to formalize that collaboration with now. For the specific connection to Common Standard 4, so Fremont provided their 5-year assessment cycle as evidence, and that was actually available at the site visit, but they provide that again to show that they do have a process of this continuous improvement year in, year out. And they highlighted that for this year, again, they'll have feedback specific to induction and be collaborating with this broader group of stakeholders. So lastly, for the second stipulation, which addresses Common Standard 1, at the site visit, the team found no evidence that the education unit faculty and instructional personnel regularly and systematically collaborate with colleagues in the broader educational community outside of their district. And the efforts that are being undertaken by the district now are to do the collaboration with the neighboring school district, both leadership that you see on Zoom today, and also their full release mentors, and also to spend at least 1 to 2 days each year to participate in other outside professional development opportunities that will allow them to collaborate in a broader community. So in conclusion, staff has reviewed each part of the 6-month follow-up report and provides it in full for your review. And I'll now turn it over to Josh and Tom to make some comments.
Well, it's good to be here. I have to say I prefer being there in person than on Zoom, but this will do for today, I guess. And we don't really have anything specific to add other than I wrote that report about a month ago to send to Jake. And so we now actually have dates on the calendars for most of the meetings that I said were going to be set up, including one in about 2 hours from now with the lead resource specialist.
And I'll just add that I really have appreciated, this is the first time through this process, and Jake's feedback specifically to Josh has been really helpful so we can address the specific program needs that were identified. So it's been really helpful for us to have the relationship so we can specifically implement what the commission has asked us to do.
Great, thank you both. Any committee members have any questions you'd like to ask or any discussion to engage in? All right, seeing none, this is an information action item. No action is really required at this time unless the COA wishes to take any action. Member Riggs, are you thinking? No, okay, we're watching the wheels turn, okay. All right, seeing no comments and seeing no action, then no action is required at this time. Is that correct? Okay, okay, all righty, so all right, well, I guess no action is required. Thank you, Mr. Schuler. Thank you, Mr. Maisel. And thank you, Reddy Abakulovitz.
Perfect.
There we go.
All right, I got it. Great. Thank you all for joining us. I appreciate it. All right.
Thank you.
Have a good day. You bet. Ahead of schedule. You guys are ready. All right, we're moving along then. Item 29.
Really? Great.
I like the dance, Kathy. So it's not. Yes, can you hear us on Zoom?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Item 29. This is item 94. I want to be sure I'm.
Item 94.
We're only just begun. Okay, so. Trying to set me up here. That's what you're trying to do. So item 29 is a report of the accreditation team to Capistrano Unified School District. Consultant Gabe Roby will present this action item, and joining her by technology, our institutional representative, Ricky Belsh, or Belshi?
Ricky Belshi, yes.
Ricky Belshi, welcome. The administrative teaching assistant, principal, and also induction and team lead, Joanne Jenkins. Is Joanne there as well? Doesn't sound like it.
Voice, but it sounds this big.
Good morning. This is Joanne Jenkins. Thank you for
there you
unmuting
are.
me. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Glad you're
This is
joining us.
Joanne.
Thank you so much. Great. Can you hear us okay?
Okay, thank you. I can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Does anyone need to recuse themselves? Seeing none, Ms. Roby, please begin.
Thank you. The site visit to Capistrano Unified School District took place in March of this year, the 18th through the 20th. Joanne Jenkins led a team of 3, 2 of which were on spring break. So they gave up some of their spring break hours to serve for the commission. They were compensated. They got to take extra time off when they got back. The process went smooth as silk with no additional pieces. And I will turn this over to Joanne for the report.
Thank you, Gay. We totally agree with Gay. The Capistrano site visit commenced easily and according to schedule. The district and program graciously hosted and supported us in reviewing and meeting with all of their stakeholders. We found while on the visit that the CAPO, doing air quotes for you, culture and community is truly evident through their intentional support for developing their newest educators and administrators. The stakeholders obviously know and regard one another. It was so welcoming between each of them as they entered the room. They welcomed us as well, even not knowing any of us. The district leadership just appropriately shared the district's commitment to growing teachers and administrators in the CAPO way. They seek out their strongest teachers to be mentors. They coach the coaches. And because of their induction programs, teacher and administrator, they're truly seeing now how candidates in both programs are also having a positive impact on their mentors and coaches. Everyone is growing, and it was evident in Capistrano that it does take a village, and they are working together, and they're making great strides. The program staff is extremely supportive and visible. The stakeholders really appreciated and regarded all of their willingness to support everyone in any way needed. One candidate had shared she was new to the district, new to the area, didn't know anyone, and the program actually made her feel as though she was one of their colleagues, their friends, and felt so welcome. Their communication from the program level and responsiveness was recognized across all stakeholder groups. It was refreshing and exciting to hear how a program was so embedded in the process of welcoming all new people to the district. Across all stakeholder groups, it was also evident that they have a clear understanding of the ins and outs of the program. Because of that level of communication, their advisory crew truly feels as though that they see the vision for accreditation and what CAPO can do to meet that, and are excited to just continue to move forward. CAPO history is there because of all the analysis of data through the advisory committee and the leadership of the district itself being involved in the collaborative process across the way for improvement. On the basis of the site visit team's investigation, we truly found all common standards were met and all program standards were met, and bring forward a recommendation for full accreditation status.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. We now invite the institutional representative to briefly comment about the visit. We remind you this is not a time to dispute the team report, but rather provide any thoughts that you may have regarding the visit.
First, thank you for allowing me to zoom in. It allows us to keep the funds here with our educators and in our program. So I greatly appreciate this opportunity. The team's feedback was fabulous. They provided insight. They let us. The beauty of the site review is they had the opportunity to talk to our new teachers and our coaches and mentors, as well as our district leadership, and provide feedback to us that we might not otherwise hear, because they did it in a way, in a trusting environment that allowed them to truly speak up. So we heard things that we had never heard before, for which we're truly grateful. The process ran so smoothly. The team came in ready to work. They were so prepared, and we were really grateful for a smooth running site review. So thank you for the feedback. Thank you for being so well prepared. It's helping us learn and grow and move forward.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Belshi. This is an action item. Is there a motion to accept the team report for accreditation? So moved by Committee Member Borges, seconded by Committee Member Alvarado. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries. Congratulations and great work. Absolutely well done. So thank you, Ms. Belshi, Ms. Jenkins, and also Ms. Roby. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We are ahead of time. Mr. Lux, do we have?
San Gabriel's ready.
That's wonderful. Everyone's smiling. It's like, wow. All right, we are on item 30. Item 30 is a report of the accreditation team to San Gabriel Unified School District. Consultant Bob Laux will introduce this action item, and joining him by video are institutional representative Gail Calhoun, induction program coordinator, and team lead Dr. Barbara Severns. Severns or Severns?
Severance.
Severns. All right, thank you.
Yes.
Anyone need to recuse themselves? Seeing none, Mr. Laux, please begin.
Okay, thank you. March 11th to 13th, the site visit team went to San Gabriel Unified School District for their site visit. San Gabriel Unified was a gracious host and very prepared for our visit, which ran very smoothly. Barbie Severns, the team lead, will now give you the team's recommendations.
Good morning, committee members. First, I really want to thank the school district for their genuine hospitality and welcome that they extended to our team. We really did feel welcomed when we were there. Our team reviewed nearly every one of the documents that the program made available to us, and we interviewed members from all of the stakeholder groups. I believe our recommendation of accreditation can best be summed up in just a couple of quotes from the interviews. The site administrator said that the program is very beneficial because I see the teachers become natural reflectors and thinkers. I see them practicing reflection because it was instilled in them by the program. And we know that that's one of the biggest goals that we have in what we are working on. And as said by one of the education specialist candidates, working with the ILP with the mentor helps us with working in our classrooms. It helps with reflection, as does the feedback. Seminars helped to drive my instruction. And a year one candidate said, ILP and goal setting keeps me accountable. My mentor encourages me to keep my students engaged no matter what. To us, it was very clear that the San Gabriel induction program is having a positive impact on the support and the education of the students within the participating districts and is certainly aligned with all of the standards that we reviewed. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Severns. We now invite the institutional representative to briefly comment about the visit. We remind you not a time to dispute the team report, but rather provide any thoughts that you may have about the visit. So, Ms. Calhoun, can you? There you are. Okay.
Yes, thank you so much. I just wanted to take a moment to express our appreciation for the process, the visit. It was incredibly informing and affirming at the same time. Our leadership and liaison team members all wanted to express the same thoughts and sentiments that we continue to learn throughout the process, and we have another list of things to work on as a result for continuous improvement. And I think that that was what the whole experience was meant to be. We appreciated the opportunity to have our reviewers give us honest, meaningful feedback, and we also appreciated the kindness and integrity that they brought to the process. So thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing that. It's always nice to hear that there's some good work going on in support for your program. Any committee member have any discussion or questions you'd like to ask? All right, seeing none, this is an action item, so there's a motion to accept the team report for accreditation. You're good. Okay, Member Riggs.
I move we accept the team's report.
Okay, so moved by Member Riggs, seconded by Member Tchaikovsky. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations. And I do want to thank you also, institutional representative, for your comments about how supportive that the process has been for you. That is really wonderful to hear. We know that that's the intent of it, and the fact that you're able to receive it as such and understand that's the intent and have such glowing comments for the team. We appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
So again, thank you, Ms. Calhoun. Thank you, Dr. Severns, and thank you, Mr. Laux. Thank you all. Okay, we're looking at item 31 right now. And item 31 is a report of the accreditation team to Clovis Unified School District. Consultant Bob Laux will present the action item. Joining him by video technology are institutional representatives Christy Weens, Director of Induction, and Deborah Parra, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum, Instruction, and Accountability. Can the team representatives hear us?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, welcome. And team lead Kimberly Lilienthal was not able to be with us. Anyone need to recuse themselves? Seeing none, Mr. Locks, please begin.
Thank you. The site visit team arrived at Clovis Unified School District on April 1st and found that Clovis Unified was well prepared for our visit and ensured that we had everything that we needed to have a thorough visit. All program standards for their teacher induction program were found to be met, and all common standards were found to be met. Unanimous recommendation of accreditation was based on a thorough review of all institutional and programmatic instruction.
Can you hear us on institutional reps? Can you hear us?
We can hear you now, yes.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. All right, subtle. We now invite the institutional representatives to briefly comment about the visit. We remind you it's not a time to dispute the team report, but rather provide any thoughts that you may have about the visit.
We thought the visiting team was actually, they were great to work with. They asked really good questions. They helped us clarify our thinking around different parts of our program, and it was really a very pleasurable activity for us.
We appreciated the feedback, input, and the validation, and even further considerations for our program.
Great, thank you. Any committee member have an opportunity to want to make a comment, question? Committee member Alvarado.
Good morning. I just want to congratulate the team at Clovis Unified for such a great report, and it's evidence of your commitment to the teachers you're serving. So thank you for that. And also, given that it was noted this is your first accreditation visit, you successfully have been able to transition from the old standards to the new standards and ensuring that your candidates have individualized learning plans. And so that's something that you should be proud of. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other committee member wish to comment? Okay, this is an action. Oh, committee member Tchaikovsky.
Yeah, hi. It was nice to read your report, and like you, I'm responsible for supervising an induction program that kind of came back to life with these new standards. So your program looks somewhat familiar to mine, and the fact that you have so many completers as a ratio of your ongoing candidates attests to your efficiency, and you're getting the job done. So good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anybody else wish to comment? All right, this is an action item. Is there a motion to accept the team report? So moved by committee member Forbes, second by committee member Alvarado. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Weens, Ms. Parra, and Mr. Locks, and congratulations. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Have a good day.
You too.
You too.
Do we have Loyola?
I think we're going to do Loyola. Joe Bertzel and Loyola, do you want to come to the table a little early? We're ready for you, if you guys are ready.
So item 32 is a report of the accreditation team to Loyola Marymount University. Consultant Dr. Katie Corey will present the action item, and joining her at the table are institutional representatives Dr. Franca Del Olio, is that correct? All right, thank you. LMU School of Education Associate Dean for Continuous Improvement, Assessment, and Accreditation. And then Dr. Mary Kay McCullough, the LMU School of Education Interim Dean, as well as team lead Dr. Joe Birdsell. Anyone need to recuse himself? All right, seeing none, Dr. Corey, will you please begin?
Well, on March 24th through the 26th, a new adventure really took place. This was the very first of the new CAPE standards and the combined visit with CTC. And so it was an honor, really, to be a part of that as a consultant. And it was also an honor, and I'm going to take just a little extra time, if you don't mind, to talk a little bit about Dr. Birdsell. I know we don't usually do that, but I just have to commend her on the work that she did, because this was no easy task, because first of all, it was the first one. And so as we went, we were learning new things each time. And what made it extremely successful, too, was the fact that LMU and Franca and Mary especially prepared an amazing spreadsheet interview schedule. It would go from about here to here between all of the CAPE interviews and all of the CTC interviews. And I wanted to step back a moment for those of you who are new here for the COA, just to say that this process, we had really unique opportunities, because the in-CAPE visits in the past had like 3 sentences that the team had to respond to that were not aligned with those in-CAPE standards, but the new CAPE standards and our new CTC standards did not all align quite so well. So there was an opportunity to look at lots of things by that team. And Joe led that process successfully with one of the team members to really do all of the non-aligned standards, which are a lot. If you've looked at the crosswalk, you would know that. And so it's a great many of those. So it's way beyond the 3 sentences. So thank you, Dr. Birdsell, for doing a successful job of that and bringing that information to the team so there could be a really excellent informed team decision. And then let's add one more caveat to that. This year, and this year only, the CAPE team did not interview for the advanced programs. So guess who did that? Dr. Birdsell and team members from our team, but she had to lead that process, and that was different for us than it will be in the future. You will probably not have another one exactly like this, so this is very unique. But it was also a very successful visit as far as the process, and we were able to do it all in only 3 days. So there is another amazing miracle right there, thanks to Dr. Birdsell. So I'm giving you a lot of kudos today because you really deserve it. I was worried we were going to wear her out, but she's like those little Energizer bunnies. We could not wear her out. So she just kept going and going and going. So thank you. And thank you for having such a wonderful system for our team to be able to work through successfully, Franca and Mary. And of course, they fed us well and kept us well nourished so the team could keep going. And we worked till at least 10 every night. And some people chose to work way late into the evening, but to make sure that everything was appropriate, fair, and accurate in this, and I do believe we've presented that report to you. Now I will let Dr. Birdsell continue on with the information regarding the actual visit.
Thank you, Katie. Dear COA members, it is my pleasure to bring you this summary of the behind-the-scenes action that went on with the CTC team and the CAPE team on the visit to Loyola Marymount University. As you are aware, this was the first CAPE joint visit to a California institution. The CTC Common Standards were used to review all the advanced programs, as Katie just mentioned, with no input on advanced programs from CAPE, since this year CAPE institutions had the option to leave advanced programs out of the CAPE review. This meant that the CTC team would get input from the CAPE team on the initial program standards, where they aligned with the California standards, plus would verify the work of the program summaries and review the advanced programs to ensure they met the CTC Common Standards. In addition, there were 11 elements of the California Common Standards that were not crosswalked with CAPE that needed to be reviewed. Fortunately, there was a second Common Standards reviewer and author, Nate, without whom we could not have finished the report. The team worked before the visit in a pre-visit conference for the CTC team. In this meeting, we reviewed the work that would need to be completed prior to the visit. After that, each team member interviewed their program director prior to the visit in order to better understand the context of the program. Either one of the consultants, Jake or Katie, or I was on the call with the reviewer and the academic program lead to help guide new reviewers and act as backup note takers as needed. Each team member wrote a preliminary report that was submitted about 10 days before the visit so that the consultants and I could ensure that we were ready to hit the ground running. Our visit included a very busy Sunday schedule, as that is the time to get people from off campus to the campus for interviews, since LMU is very near LAX. In addition, there were Zoom interviews scheduled with those who are part of the program, faculty, staff, alumni, and students in areas of the state not near Los Angeles, Oakland, Central Valley, etc. These Zoom interviews also brought together for the interviewers all the voices of people who represented different pathways to the same credential. Most notably, in the case of LMU, the people who are part of the Teach for America program. Many of the interviews had both a CAPE team member and a CTC team member in attendance. And Jake and Katie stepped in where we needed extra people in meetings as well. The CTC team had much less processing time with the CAPE team than we have had during previous combined state visits. As a note for future site visits, finding ways to increase the combined team meeting time will be key to continuing to strengthen the process if we're going to continue to use joint visits. The California members on the CAPE team provided valuable input to bridge the gap in whole team processing time. The team wrestled with one area in particular, that of program impact. The draft CAPE report, which I believe is an appendix in your report, includes a recommendation for an AFI designation on CAPE Standard 4.1, which requires that the institution include evidence, quote, that program completers contribute to an expected level of student learning growth, end quote. This CAPE standard has a much more specific and prescribed requirement for the institution's program impact. Because the CTC standards do not require evidence of demonstrated P12 student learning growth, the CTC team did not believe that the recommended AFI led to an area of concern for the CTC report. The CTC team concurred that the evidence to indicate program impact was adequate to be deemed met. Each program director, as well as the leadership team at LMU, is well aware of their next steps in this area, and they stand ready to add information beyond anecdotal stories or surveys for identification of future program impact. Based on the pre-visit work, the interviews, and the processing that the team completed, we are assured that the LMU programs met each of the program standards and all common standards. Our recommendation to the COA is for a finding of accreditation.
Thank you, Dr. Birdsell. We now invite institutional representatives to briefly comment about the visit. We remind you it's not a time to dispute the team report, but rather provide any thoughts that you may have pertaining to the visit.
Thank you. I'm Mary McCullough, privileged to serve as the interim dean in the School of Education at Loyola Marymount. And Franca and I really wanted to be here in person today to highlight the team that helped us and to thank everyone at the commission and especially our team. Really want to give a shout out, as Katie already did, to Joe Birdsell, Katie Croy, and Jake Schuler. The team was amazing. It was a lot of work. I think they gave you a pretty good idea of what went on, both behind the scenes and during the scenes and during the process. It was compact, short. I think they interviewed something like 500 people in a variety of places. But what it really did for us at LMU was it brought us together in terms of collaboration among all our programs. We learned a lot from the work with CTC and CAPE going back and forth, and I cannot credit the CTC team enough for making those avenues smooth for us at a university, but also helping us navigate these two entities looking at us at the same time. So we learned a lot. That's my new definition of leadership. Leadership is learning. But I cannot say enough about the team from CTC that served us so well, helped us so much. And I want to give Franca a chance to say something if she'd like.
I have nothing more to add except that it was quite a comprehensive process, and that we could not have done it without the CTC. It would have been absolutely impossible because this was a new road that was even being put down. It's not that we were walking a new road. There was no road there. And the CTC helped pave that road for us. And I am not understating when I say at least a phone call, a text, or an email a day between myself and Katie and or Jake. So thank you so much for the opportunity to really study ourselves and to help lift us to higher standards, higher rigor, and excellence for our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could make one more comment, Joe Bertzel mentioned about the AFI. We are working on that, and we are writing a rejoinder. We've been working on that since the visit, so we're getting ready to send that back to CAPE just as a point of information. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Corey.
And just one clarification to the report that you have from CAPE is not their final report. It is a draft of their final. There won't be major edits, but there will be some changes. If you ever have an opportunity to see the final report, you'll notice a few things will be a little different. But and the AFI goes to their board for approval or disapproval or however they want to proceed, just like it comes here. So their team does not make they make not even a recommendation, really. They don't make any decisions or recommendations on any standards. Everything now goes before their board.
Thank you.
So a little different than in previous years.
Thanks for clarifying. All right, committee members, opportunity for comments, questions. Committee member Riggs.
Congratulations. And I just really have a question related to the visit itself in the Zoom meetings, because we've had some conversations about that as to when you did the Zoom meetings, were they always individual or were you having meetings with groups of people? And how did that work if it was groups? Did you hear from everybody in the group? I think that was an issue that we've been dealing with.
Well, I think Dr. Croy and Jake Schuler worked very well with the LMU team, and our Zoom visits had no more than 5 people in them at a time. So it was good to be able to see them on a screen. There were no Zoom meetings where there were people in person and on the screen, so we got to make sure that everybody was spoken to, and we heard from everyone. And that's how you get to 500 people interviewed pretty fast.
That is a remarkable number. All right, any other committee member? Member Christia.
I just wanted to say thank you for blazing the trail.
Yeah.
Because I know that was a lot of work, and I just wanted to say thank you for that, and thanks for your transparency, because it's going to help a lot of us who are going down that road soon enough. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any further comments or questions? All right, this is an action item. Is there a motion to accept the team report? So moved by Committee Member Borges, second by Committee Member Crecia. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations. Absolutely. A lot of work. Thank you, Dr. Del Orio, Dr. McCullough, Dr. Birdsell, and Dr. Corey. Yeah, it's a lot of work. Congratulations.
I just wanted to mention, it wasn't an accident that we chose Joe for this first event, because Joe has the ability to think broadly and to think on your feet. So we knew that as they were building the road, that you would help us construct our part of the road. So I wanted to also extend my thanks as well. Joe, we have had a discussion with Joe after the visit to talk about, what were your impressions of the process? How did it work? One of the things that we're thinking about proposing, and we'll have to talk to, I think, the deans that are at institutions that are CAPE accredited, about doing concurrent visits rather than joint visits. It's become very problematic or difficult, way more difficult than it has been in the past. Our standards aren't easily aligned. We've had to add an extra person onto the team just to do those standards that are not aligned. So we're going to be having those discussions this summer as we think about the new process. Meanwhile, Chapman and Laverne are next up on the docket for CAPE, so we'll be learning more as we go through. Joe is one of the team leads on one of those visits. So it's going to be something we will bring back to this committee about the process.
And I think in addition to just the deans in general, I think LMU's feedback on that idea of the joint visit versus the idea of a concurrent. And so what we want to do is talk with CAPE about more specifics so then we can bring specifics to our institutions to get their feedback on that.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for offering to help. It's very helpful. Thank you. Appreciative. Great. Again, congratulations. Is 11:30?
Told it was 10:15, right? 10:15.
Okay. Do you want to go back to?
We could go back to the handbook item. Yes.
Okay. We are ahead of schedule. We have item 33. We moved up to 10:15, so we have some time here to start digging into the handbook. At least talk about the procedures and some recommendations for how to proceed with it.
So I might suggest that if you have your computer open to the handbook on our website, so it's under the, let me tell you where it is. So if you go to accreditation or program sponsors and then accreditation, program sponsors, accreditation, it's on the right-hand side. You have to go to the Committee on Accreditation. Sorry, I forgot about that link. And there's both the framework and the handbook on that right-hand side. Did everybody find it? Okay, great. All right. So I don't know if we want to just kind of, I don't think we have to hit every single chapter, chapter 2 or just the standards kind of thing. But maybe, if there's a certain area that we want to talk about, if we want to jump to decisions or if you want to talk about initial approval, which we talked a little bit about yesterday.
And the thought behind this was also to use this as a beginning point to look at some big picture items or something else you feel it needs to be addressed, not to go line by line at this point. And
Right.
we'll leave that for the committee work, the smaller work, right? Which you so graciously volunteered for.
Right.
And we'll talk about how that's going to proceed at the end of today's meeting. We'll talk briefly about that. So this is a big picture, looking through any items that you feel would like to be addressed, or maybe need some clarification.
Do you want to just look at chapter 3 real quick?
Sure.
Let's go there because that's initial and program approval. I don't think we have, is Lynette in the room? Yeah, Lynette. I don't think we have any changes to initial institutional approval. We've sort of worked really hard on that one and spent lots of time, and the commission's finally in a groove. They're understanding the process. So it took a little while, but we're good on that. But the program approval are some of the kinds of things we talked about yesterday about provisional approval of some fashion and having some sort of system. So we will try to incorporate that in there. I think we do need to talk to our legal counsel on that, just to make sure that there's nothing that prohibits us from doing that. Why don't you just take a second to scan that chapter to see if there's anything. Uh-huh.
You can use your microphone.
Use the mic, yeah.
Page 6 has the commission approval, provisional, full approval, all that. Is that what you want us to look at?
That is for that's an institution.
Okay.
But then right under that is number 2, initial approval of programs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. Committee Member Alvarado.
I've been thinking about subject matter programs.
Yeah.
And though there is a process for getting them approved,
right,
there is no process for ensuring fidelity of implementation. And so I'm wondering if, again, not necessarily that I'm interested in adding workload to anyone, but at the same time, I think if we're charged with overseeing the quality of these programs, how do we know other than they were approved at one point in time? And so it may be that there's something we need to think about there.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's been on the to-do list for a very, very long time. In fact, it was part of the before the strengthening and streamlining, and when we brought in induction into the system, there was a recommendation, you might remember, that says bring in the subject matter programs. But the issue there was resources, time, energy, trying to figure out how to get that. But I think there is a point because, and Erin knows this well because she oversees a lot of this, but they are approved once and then not really revisited after that. And now that we have a matrix that's required of new subject matter programs, maybe there is something we could look at in terms that is sort of a lower level, just making sure that the coursework is still aligned to the domains in there. But I don't know, Erin, if you want to share anything.
Sure. So I really appreciate you saying that. Aside from the fact of it being potentially a workload issue, bringing all of those programs into our accreditation cycle, it's not clear whether or not we have a legislative mandate to do, not mandate, a legislative authority to do so, or statutory authority. Because statute says that we are authorized to accredit institutions offering programs leading to a credential. And subject matter is a component of that, but it is not a credential program. So it's unclear, even if we had the resources, if we could bring those into our accreditation cycle without some sort of statutory change.
Member Alvarado.
And it may be that as we go through and revising the handbook, that it will prompt a need for getting clarification or addition to, the statutes or what have you. But at the same time, I can think of an instance in which, let's say that, we come to knowledge of a program having greatly deviated from what they were approved of. What mechanisms do we have in place to at least prompt that program to either comply with the program they were approved to offer or terminate its subject matter waiver authorization? And I don't see that.
Currently, there aren't any. We hear from those programs again, typically, if the state board adopts some new K-12 curriculum requirements, we then will evaluate whether or not our subject matter requirements are still aligned with that. And if we update the subject matter requirements, then programs are all required to submit an updated matrix showing that they are now in alignment. So, for instance, obviously we did that with Common Core around math and English, and we recently did it around science. But until something like that triggers it, you're correct. We don't typically reevaluate those programs on a regular basis. Mm-hmm.
Member Briggs.
We've thought about this for a long time, and I've struggled with it. And when we lost the ability to have subject matter waiver for multiple subject, I was very saddened by that, because I tend to feel like I'd rather have people go into teaching who've had years of study in what's considered the content that they'll be teaching, rather than them just passing a test. But yet I do have the concerns, and I know that courses often are designed for teacher track people and the non-teacher track people. And then you may have, 20 faculty teaching those courses, and what is the fidelity of how they're implemented? So I don't know what the answer is, but I also get concerned that if we get if we would require too much from our colleagues in the undergraduate fields, that they won't be willing to even do this. And I do think it's a good route for people to get their content knowledge and understanding. So I don't know what the answer is, but I know we've gone long decades without really having any kind of update.
Member Alvarado.
Again, I'm really sensitive to the workload issue. And And it may be something as simple as a randomized audit, similar to what, the threat of IRS audit. It keeps us all in compliance. And if such a thing was to be implemented, it wouldn't necessarily create a huge amount of workload, but every program knowing that there could be a CTC audit for subject matter, programs, waiver programs, then, that certainly would keep everyone on the straight and narrow, ensuring compliance.
Sure, yeah, Ms. Sullivan.
I just want to acknowledge the comment that Member Riggs made around potentially overstress, and I'm not suggesting that what you're saying would overstress the programs, but it's very, very real that we have heard at times from programs, especially when we've required them to make some not insignificant changes around things like Common Core and Next Generation Science Standards. And we've heard back from some subject matter programs that have said, forget it, it's too much, we're just not going to offer anymore. And I know in some cases that it's been individuals in your roles that have then had to reach out to those folks and say, no, we really need you to offer this program. So that certainly is a very real concern as well.
Member Riggs.
I just am sitting here thinking about the audit idea, and I just hope that we don't lose that. I've never considered that. I think that's an interesting idea. So hope somebody keeps note of that as a possibility.
I wrote that down.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, Member Alvarado.
And I'll just say this as a last comment on that, is that having been in higher ed for quite some time, that there can be a tendency for there to be programs that begin to shift over time, maybe mission creep and going in different ways. And so just ensuring that programs are aware of the importance of remaining aligned with the standards, and that there's some mechanism that they could be held accountable for that. It shouldn't require any more work if they're doing the right thing. So in that sense, it's not going to add a huge amount of work for those who already have the programs or those who commit to starting those programs. Again, it's just making sure that everyone commits to implement what they've been approved to implement.
Okay, thank you. Any further thoughts on this part of the chapter? We are still in chapter 3. Look. Okay. Yep. Mm-hmm. No worries. No worries.
I know the section as we get down to page 9 on program approval in terms of inactive, active, we're going to take a really close look at the language there, because over time it became clear that, and I can't remember here, it became clear that inactive really meant you're not taking any more candidates. You can still recommend during that inactive period of time because you may be teaching out some candidates. So I don't know if the language is clear enough. Once an institution withdraws the program, they cannot recommend candidates any longer, at least on the CTC online. So we'll take a really good look at that and make sure that all of that played out the way it needed to. We had to make some changes here and there because of certification, that kind of thing. So that will be part of what we do in terms of just making sure everything's accurate. Part of that drift as things evolved over time. I think this section has the section about, it also does. On the last page, it talks about the closure of programs. So we need to really look at those really closely in that language. And that is probably language that needs to be in regs, I would think, is the closure of programs. One of the areas as I look at on page 11, there is, when we're talking about inactive programs, and you can ask any consultant in this room, we have here an inactive program, it's the second to the last bullet, will be included in accreditation activities in a modified manner as determined by the administrative accreditation. And what that was meant to do was institutions go inactive for a variety of reasons. Some are going inactive with the expectation that they're going to reactivate. Maybe they're rethinking, they're restructuring, and then they're going to reactivate a somewhat modified program from what they have. Others are really just teaching out and eventually going to withdraw. And so kind of the factors around why the program's inactive or what's happening with it, what the plans are for the institution, will kind of dictate what we do at the site visit with these programs. If they're teaching out and they're eventually going to withdraw, we don't really need to spend as much time on those reviewing those programs as we would if they still have 10 candidates in the program. And so we may need to get a little bit more specific there. That gives us some flexibility, but it also is so broad that people don't really know what it means. So go ahead.
So could inactive have two designations, just as you described? Inactive for purposes of termination versus inactive for purposes of retooling?
Sure.
And so then that sort of dictates and helps you, not to say that they can't switch from one to the other, but at least it gives you a sense about, just in looking at what they're asking for, what their intended purpose is.
Okay. We can think about that.
And I think it also depends on where are they in that inactive status. If they're in that very first year where they still have up to the full 15 candidates, I think it's a more thorough review than if they're in year 5 and they're down to one candidate.
Right.
So I think we might have to articulate all of that in the handbook.
Okay.
Not only the two purposes, but where are they in that inactive time frame with how many candidates?
Right.
Member Riggs?
Would the designations also help you in the annual report as to the reason for,
it's a good idea,
how we were always feeling like we were losing that data to say, when the commission would say, well, everybody passes, would that help a little bit with the retooling idea?
I think it really could if we asked them for a little bit of a reason. Now, this actually will be our third inactive status because there's already 2 inactive statuses. Yeah. There's the one where the institution asks for it, and there's the one, what we call it, transition inactive. So all the level 2 ed specialist programs have been transition inactive since they were no longer allowed to enroll new candidates. So we'll be up to a third inactive status.
Yeah, Dr. Corey?
And not to throw other confusing information in, but a lot of the inactive folks ask us questions about when we want to go inactive. And when we ask them things like why, they're not sure. Right. So I don't know if you want a fourth one we don't have a clue why they have some ideas, but they don't know really. They haven't worked through. And part of it is it's going to give them time to work through where they want to be. So that's part of some of their processing of saying, we're not sure if we should close this program, or if we should revisit and refocus and retool. It's a process that they're kind of going through, and that's part of the rationale behind asking for the inactive status. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if we're going to get a clear answer on that or not. Some will have a very clear idea and a very clear answer, so it's not a bad idea to ask that, but just telling you, some are curious, and that's why they're going inactive at that stage.
What's that?
Well, just like in a clinical diagnosis, it's NOS, not otherwise specified.
Oh, got it. Member Tchaikovsky.
Yeah, I as Katie's talking, I'm thinking of situations near and dear to me where I was kind of glad it seemed a little bit not that simple to be inactive, and I think what we got to do, especially in induction, which isn't offered by everybody for all eligible teachers, and I think this entity's intent is to try to support new teachers to the greatest degree possible, without there being assured funding, from various sources. So from my own vantage point, it was kind of the fact that there were fairly limited options for going inactive, which kind of put the pressure on us to, like, if you really want to go inactive, my message to my leadership was, if we go inactive because like there's a lack of funding, there's no like line item in this handbook that says that's a reason to go inactive, is that you've just decided not to fund it if you have fewer than 5 candidates. And I went back and I was like, these are blah, 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 blah. And they were like, oh. And I think that, I don't think that they had, the people who make these decisions had decided to scrap the program. But the fact that the messaging was that, you need to carry on with these people, and this is a commitment to these teachers' development, helped preserve, the future direction of induction in my area. So something to think about how these guidelines are interpreted and used by people to, either implement or not.
Good point. Member Forbes.
Well, I just wanted to echo that because I can think of the exact opposite example in the same county. So obviously it's not being interpreted in the same way. Just pointing that out. One rather large urban district that discontinued and withdrew.
So I think I interpreted it as desired, put it that way. There was enough specificity that I could make the case on behalf of the program and the teachers in it, which I think we kind of want to leave on the table, right? So it can be used as a vehicle for advocacy, right? Since it is a policy document.
Sure. You want to stay with this chapter, keep going through? You feel
I
good?
think we're good, yeah.
Okay.
And I think William, did we have a 10:15? Is that what we had? Not sure if she's on yet.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll see if she's available. That's helpful to me.
This would be Saugus?
Yes, this would be Saugus.
Okay.
We'll see if she's joined.
Over here?
Sounds like she's here.
So, committee, we're going to look at item 33 that was at 11:30 that we moved forward.
I think that's our last.
It is, yeah.
Our last site visit reporter.
Hi, Amy. Can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Great. And we can hear you.
Great. Welcome. Item 33 is a report of actions taken by Saugus Union School District to address stipulations. Consultant William Hattrick will present the action item. Joining him by video technology is institutional representative Amy Gaudet. Anyone need to recuse himself? Seeing none, Mr. Hattrick, will you please begin?
Good morning again, committee members. This item addresses the stipulations for Saugus Union School District and their 7th year report, including previously quarterly report submissions. Saugus is the teacher induction program sponsor for the Santa Clarita Valley Consortium. Their site visit took place in April 2018, and the team made a recommendation of accreditation with stipulations to be addressed through quarterly reports during year 7 of the accreditation cycle. Saugus provided staff with final evidence in April, and based on a thorough review of this information, staff is recommending that the COA remove stipulations from Saugus and change its status to accreditation. In the report, you will find a full response to each stipulation, links to evidence, and additional links to the previous quarterly reports. And I'll go over each of those stipulations briefly and how they've addressed them. For the first stipulation related to having a research-based vision of teaching and learning, Saugus collaborated with the Center for Educational Leadership and has been using rubrics for use with mentors as a means to share a common language around teaching and learning in the classroom. Orientation and training to the rubrics was provided to mentors, and they are successfully being used throughout the consortium, which is 4 districts. For stipulation 2, to diversify the educator pool in California, Saugus has expanded its efforts with outreach to local IAGs, finding ways for current classified staff to work towards obtaining a credential, and collaboration between the 4 assistant superintendents of human resources for each district in the consortium. Stipulation 3 was actually addressed at the first quarterly report, which you have linked there, by sharing the adopted induction program handbook. They just needed an update to that and to have their advisory board approve that, which was done. And for the last stipulation regarding mentor feedback, a system was developed so that the induction coordinator and lead mentors conduct observations and then provide the mentors with that formative feedback. They submit growth plans to the coordinator, and those are reviewed by leadership prior to their observations so the feedback can align with their chosen areas of growth. And this system of receiving formative feedback was in place during this past academic year and will continue in future years. I will turn it over to Amy to add anything I have forgotten and then answer any questions you may have.
That was pretty thorough. I don't have too much to add, but I'm happy to answer questions if things come up.
Sorry, any committee member have any questions you'd like to ask or engage in discussion? All right. Seeing none, this is an action item. So is there a motion to approve changing the accreditation status from accreditation with stipulations to accreditation? So moved by Committee Member Alvarado. Is there a second? By Committee Member Forbes. All in favor, please say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. All right, congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'd like to give a shout out to William for his support. It was really helpful to have him be so responsive and help me understand the process along the way. So thank you, William.
You're welcome.
Thank you, and your feedback is helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Gaudette, and thank you, Mr. Hattrick.
All right. Thanks again, Amy.
Okay, bye-bye.
Do we want to go back to the handbook at this point?
You want to be here, so. But now's our chance to kind of, if there's something burning,
okay,
it would be helpful.
Could we also make an invitation, and we'll send an email out to all committee members, so even those who aren't here,
right,
that over the next month, in your free time, when you happen to be reading the accreditation handbook or thinking about this work, if you think of a topic, send it in to Cheryl so we can add it to our list, so we can have the most comprehensive approach in our June meeting.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Makes a lot
That
of
would be great, because sometimes, as you're going home today, you may think of something that doesn't come to you in the next 30 minutes as you want to finish the meeting.
Right. And I think for the subgroup, we'll send out a doodle poll and we can have a conversation in a couple of weeks. I know it gets busy right now, but.
Before we jump onto this, one of the things that came through with the reports today, and I wanted to make the comment with staff here, is how helpful the staff has to these programs that are going through the review process and how helpful the team has been. I think without that support, I think many of these programs would feel like they're at a loss, or at least that they're up against a program or are up against a committee or up against the CTC. And I never got that sense that they felt that. I felt that it was a supportive body and that everybody here at the commission does such great work that the staff really supports what they're doing. I don't think without that we'd have such successful outcomes for the programs. So I just want to be that on record.
That's absolutely true. Being on all sides of it for the last 15 years, the staff is an integral part of it.
And we heard that continually, time and time again, from every program that came through today. So bravo, congratulations. Yes, Committee Member Alvarado.
So to go back to the previous topic on the work of the subcommittee.
Yeah.
On the work, can we talk a little bit about the parameters of the charge for this work group? Is it that we're charged with figuring out details or just bringing up issues that need to be teased out by staff, or both? Or again, just a clarification of what the charge is.
Well, my thought behind that was that rather than try to discuss things en masse, where it can end up being a very slow process, have a representative body from the larger group here to actually do the work to find information that they think would be useful or ask for clarification to forward to the staff. And staff, correct me if I'm wrong, the staff in turn would go ahead and make some adaptations, some corrections to that or changes to bring it back to the smaller committee for further comment. And then after that, once that's gone through the process, it would then become before the full COA for discussion and approval. Does that help? Okay. So, Cheryl, what would you like us to do at this point? Oh, I'm sorry, Member Tchaikovsky. I know.
Well, the comment right before Jose Luis's was what I just wanted to also, as a program kind of coordinator of my own, second the comments that you made, Bob, about the support coaching. aspect of the consultants in this group. Like, I didn't know anything about what that was going to be like as somebody kind of starting a new program. I had this vision of people, you know, who are the central scrutinizers, who are going to be looking for everything with like clipboards and checking things off. And it's really obvious to me that there's program improvement is the goal of this whole process. I mean, a number of people have said that. And I just think sometimes we take some things for granted, some really powerful processes that people beyond this group don't know about. I mean, yes, I know these meetings are public. Anybody who's really curious can look at it and celebrate, you know, these comments that people are making. But I just wonder to what degree it's published beyond that group, what consultants at CTC actually do. I mean, I know that sounds kind of weird. Like, I know this isn't supposed to be propaganda and spin, but ultimately I think it would behoove educational entities out there, particularly the administrators in those entities, to understand how CTC or how the COA functions as a vehicle for improving practice. You know, I mean, that part of accreditation, maybe this has to do, by way of my discursive commentary with the handbook, that the whole ultimate purpose of all this work is to drive schools toward greater accountability and service for students and, you know, adherence with standards, but at a higher level of proficiency. I mean, I don't know if that could be in some way illuminated, because the obvious content expertise of all the consultants that get up here in front of us in their respective niches illustrate this very coordinated effort on behalf of this state's educational entity. No, but honestly, that's how it looks to me. I'm putting that on public record. So, and I know from, you know, a few years out there in the field that doesn't happen by accident.
Right.
I mean, I got no reason to be overly positive about all this, but I don't think we should take that for granted. Sometimes you have to recognize how things are working really effectively and make sure that other people know that.
Ms. Clark?
I think you raise a really good point. Cheryl and I have done a couple different presentations, like at NASDAQ, which is the National Association of Directors of Teacher Education and Certification. Has nothing to do with the stock market. But when we're there, we don't really talk about consultant roles. We talk more about the procedural steps. I don't think we are very overt with the public about our consultant roles. When we work as consultants, we meet and we actually say to consultants, you need to say to your institution, I'm here as your advocate. I'm here to help you problem solve. I'm here to work with you and give you my best knowledge. If I don't have an answer, I'll take it back to my team. Someone on my team probably has an idea at the commission. Up until the day we get to the site visit. The day the site visit starts, I'm there to protect the process. Nothing you have told me will I be telling anyone. I don't tell the team lead what we talk about ahead of time. In fact, in March, I was talking with the deans at the SPAN conference, and I talked about how it's important that as an institution, you share all your concerns, share your warts with your consultant. And later that same day, one of the other consultants who was not at the conference got an email from their institution for next year of, we're going to be having conversations about some warts because I want to talk through some things with you. But you're right, that is not known. I can think off the top of my head of a number of different venues where we actually could try to make that more known. We haven't done much about that in the Cal Council environment. We've done it one-on-one with institutions. There's nothing that says we couldn't do something at either a poster session or a breakout session at Cal Council. There's nothing that says we couldn't put something together for an AACTE presentation. It's always better when it's in California so we can get there, where we share, because I want to take exception to one word you used in your description, Member Chakowski. You used the word drive towards accountability. And I would say instead, the commission's approach and our consultants is we are supporting you and helping shepherd you towards accountability. I think things like CAPE are thinking they're driving you to accountability and improvement, but they don't necessarily give you a lot of guidance. So I think it's a shepherding and a supporting you as you move and do that reflective process. So I definitely am going to put this on our list of things to think about of how can we get this message out more. You've helped articulate that for us. Thank you.
Right.
Well, and as you're talking too, it's become evident to me that not all of our systems know how to do this this accountability exercise. How are we being honest and answering to the public charge that's been placed before us through, the expectation that all kids are going to attend schools in our state? I mean, how are we honoring the promise that we have for each student to be provided access to opportunity in this amazing state, right? And the other thing that I don't think people recognize that could be lifted, these are all models that could be used. I mean, I love the fact that consultant, just the whole process of how these site visits are presented could be lifted and modified for internal program evaluation and accountability within districts. For example, we have these consultants who are objective, as you said, but even that shift from confidant to protector of the process, just that whole idea that people at the state level who have authority to determine, whether people are given accreditation or not, play those two roles. But ultimately, it's a peer review. That whole peer review thing, most administrators don't understand at all. Like people at the top who haven't participated in supervising these programs, they don't realize that the majority of the responsibility for these determining accountability lies with like a peer in the field who's the site lead or the team lead, right? So just that whole, it just really is this very delicate, elegant balance between, advocacy and accountability on behalf of equity. I mean, honestly, it's like we have this set of guidelines, we have this set of expectations, and you can have anything you want on paper. But the process that I have witnessed in my short time here in terms of how objective third-party people, the consultants, who are incredibly knowledgeable, know the right questions, know who to get to the table in order to engineer, growth toward, and yeah, I do think we're all driving toward greater accountability. We're not there. None of us is ever fully able to, document that 100% of kids have 100% of what they need. That is still a goal that we're all chasing. So I don't know, it sounds like a PR statement, but it's really impressive. And I think this mechanism has a lot to offer for districts, for school level teams. It's a very professional, honest, challenging, complex thing. You could do this in so many cheaper, awful ways. I mean, when I think about what could happen up here, it's like, wow, it's a model that I wish more people understood. Mm-hmm. And I go back to my place and I'm like, oh yeah, I was like, you should look at that. Here, look at this live stream. You can check it out and hear what people said. And they're like, but
right.
To help people better understand.
Right. Thank you. Member Forbes, then Dr. Corey.
Well, and I can remember my own experience. My chair was not exactly thrilled when he walked into the job as chair about a month before the accreditation site visit. And it was really through his experience, not only working with a consultant who he came to appreciate and value very highly, and in an authentic kind of way, because we've been through we still have to go through the hoops of cheap accountability. And I think we've all been through that with checking off the boxes and so forth. But it was his experience working with a consultant at the site, then coming here for the meeting. It happened to be the day that there was a denial of accreditation. We were next. And so our attention was quite focused. And he was really impressed with the not just the fact that, yes, there's some real teeth in this process, unlike some of the other accreditation parties, but that it was something that was a very thoughtful and the level of discussion was really impressive to him. So he became a total convert and was like, yeah, sign up for try out for the COA. And, and I've encouraged other faculty at least in my system and on my campus to go through the BIR, because I think that's, how they learn. I saw one yesterday, but I think the other thing the audience is, though, and thinking about Member Chakowski's comments, is that it's great. I think it's really important at AACTE or CCTE, those conferences, AERA for heaven's sakes, but AXA, the districts, because they're becoming bigger and bigger players in this field. And so to really help the administrators understand, the system and the way that you've described it might be another good venue.
Thank you, Dr. Corey.
Well, I think one of the things that you said was to let folks know what's really going on. And I think it's important because as a consultant, when we first start working with some institutions, it's hard for them to believe and trust that we really are there to help them and that it's okay if they have some areas of concern already in their minds, that it's probably going to come out at the site visit. It would be better to deal with it now with a consultant and see if we can work through some of the concerns, or at least help them understand what the process will be as we are interviewing and working with the team and how we put on the different hat. And so as we were finishing up some things today, one of the institutions in the hallway said, I've already gotten a call from another institution. And I told them, you will make it through. They will help you. They really mean what they say. So other institutions are starting to spread the word that it's okay. It's okay. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for growth. We're looking for processes. We're looking for where are you headed. We're looking for what are you doing to address any concerns. So thank you for those comments.
And that spreading the word is important, so it's supportive and not punitive. I mean, it's really what everyone does. I'm sorry,
yes,
Member Riggs.
Not the old gotcha.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's not the gotcha. And some of them still have got you in their minds.
Yeah,
exactly. They just do.
Yeah, a lot of people still have gotcha in their minds. And spreading that word actually makes people in my position at my institution, it makes our job a lot easier because we're not the only people out there saying, look, it's not that bad. We can do this, because it is hard when you are trying to lead that charge at the institution, because a lot of people have that old paradigm that it is a gotcha and it's, it's difficult to break that.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then it makes people more likely to engage in conversation rather than withdraw from it. Yeah. Member Riggs, then Tchaikovsky.
I love everything that the issues you raised about consultants. And in addition to the presentations, I'm wondering if there's a place for more elaboration in the handbook about the role of the consultant. Because
absolutely.
I do think, especially when agencies are just initiating a new program, it would be reassuring to them to understand. And the other thing I was going to tell you is that as you were speaking, you were really hitting, because I went back to the intro of the handbook, and you were hitting all 5 purposes of accreditation as you were talking about this. And so it just struck me that the consultants are really bridging across the purposes of accreditation in your role. And it is difficult for us who are program sponsors to trust initially. So having something in writing may be a helpful thing, because it's like an administrator who is supposed to do formative assessment and support the teacher, but then also makes a decision, right? So you're in that very delicate role. So it just was interesting because you're so unique that this explanation, which if it's in writing somewhere, and maybe you all have it in writing already, then when you bring on a new consultant, everybody has the same language, which it appears to me you do, because every consultant we've had has that language. The other thing,
that's right.
They do. The other thing I was just going to say to us as a group related to the handbook is that I feel like the purposes, as I'm looking at them, that I feel like the part that maybe I'm wrong about this, but the reason this has come up is related more to assuring. It's not the growth part. I feel like we've got the growth part under control, and regulations don't really have a lot to do with the growth part. So it's the part that the accreditation assures programs meet state standards for professional preparation, and in doing so are allowed to recommend. So that's an issue. Is a program allowed to recommend for state licensure? And the accreditation assures candidates and the public that educator preparation programs are of high quality and effective in preparing candidates to meet licensure requirements. And that the accreditation assures candidates and the public programs are accountable for quality and effectiveness of the preparation. So the others relate more to improvement stuff, which is great and part of it, but we have to make sure that what is in this is defensible for us to have the real teeth that is needed to make those assurances to the public. And I'm still not quite sure as how to do that, but I'm glad that we're having the discussion and trying to look at the handbook.
And so the handbook could be not only what's in there, but what could be in there, right? Yeah. Member Tchaikovsky.
So, yeah, the only comment I wanted to make too is that out there in my travels, you sometimes find, I found this in my first year of induction. I'd have these, we'd ask candidates to, write and submit a lesson plan. And the reason why we did that was to see how people planned their instruction so that we could respond accordingly and get them the help they needed. But what they turned in were these weird, shrink-wrapped, kind of lifted from somewhere else lesson plans that they thought were what we wanted. And they were these pseudo documents that were intended to just kind of check the box or make it happen. And there was very little integrity involved in what it was that they submitted. So that's kind of my point here too, is one thing that I think is clear about this process, which is not evident in other places, is the fact that honesty is expected. And I know that sounds obvious, like we should be honest, right? But sometimes you just give them what they want. You just give them what they want. You try to figure out what it is, and that work operates in a parallel plane to the reality of working with kids and teachers and engineering learning. So what this is about, to me, is about kind of peeling away the defenses, building the trust that allows people to actually engage in the analytic work that's required to improve your practice, which I know where Iris is like, enough with the growth stuff, right? We're talking about, holding people to a standard. But I think the two are the yin yang of what's beautiful about this whole process.
They
so
coexist.
Maybe that just needs to be articulated somehow, that it's about, you got to get it right, but you got to keep working to be honest in terms of how your organization in its local context serves kids in differentiated ways. It's sophisticated, but the vehicle that's in place here with consultants and peer review is really powerful in that regard. I just think very few places must have as articulated a system as ours. So it behooves us to track, document, describe, promote that, honestly. So I don't know if that maybe the handbook can take a role in defining that. And then, Cheryl and I were asked in San Diego if we would talk at the next induction coordinators meeting about the COA. Oh, you're on the COA. How do they actually work? Maybe you could give a little public service, just a little 10-minute presentation on what actually goes down in that scary place called the CTC, I don't know, pretty soon we'll come up with something. But I thought that was awesome. The more of us who are doing that, it's not just about anxiety. We should be anxious. We've got things we have to do. But
that would
anyway,
be the perfect opportunity for you to explain what the consultants do.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So we'll be sure to include that in our, a little promo kit, kind of like, here's what to expect.
Well, I think it's the combination. You can't have support without accountability and vice versa. They coexist, and I think that's necessary to be brought out. Ms. Clark, did you?
Oh, good.
Say, in hearing you talk, if you ever have time to jot some of that down, because it's coming from you as a member in an authentic way, it's better than we would ever be able to write it. So if that's something you can just think about and jot some things down and get them into Cheryl, I think that could be really, really helpful, because you have that member view and you're seeing it as a way for everyone to improve and for us to really impact children. I think that'd be great.
Well, I was just going to say I appreciate the comments, because the staff here is amazing. They really are on a day-to-day basis. The numbers and specificity of some of the questions that we get, and each one of them is complex, and it depends on the context, and it depends on what. So we're always problem solving. Every single day, all of us are asking each other, okay, what do you think of does this meet the standard? I don't know. Let's think about this. And so it's a highly complex job that they have, and to be supportive and at the same time make sure that institutions are held accountable is really important. I think, the majority of the people, as we talk about, are very open, want to know what we think. There's a little handful of people that might be more resistant and just want to do it their way. But our consultants are really good about problem solving. It's like, okay, they're being resistant, but how do I approach this? So it's really important. I also think that message I would love for the commissioners to hear that message.
Mm-hmm.
And they get to hear it at their annual, they get a report each year. But that would be really wonderful, I think, for the staff here to hear how helpful and informative, they are to the process and how critical they are to the whole process, because they are amazing.
Ms. Roby.
I just wanted to say that while I'm sitting here listening to this, it's not only the consultant, it's the consultants going out and we're very supportive of the programs, and we urge them to take it as support. But I'm hearing a lot more from institutions that I have worked with, at least, that not only, I think they start collaborating. I'm hearing a lot of institutions that after we talk to them and we start our work with them on their site visit, oh, well, I'm going to go talk to so-and-so about this, or I'm just hearing a lot of collaboration amongst institutions. So it's also, I think, opening up those communication lines. I don't know, we know so-and-so that had their visit, they found it a positive experience, I'm going to go talk to them. So I'm just seeing some changes.
Well, I speak to a lot of staff. I was actually talking to a few again today, and inevitably the comment is always that they're given support to do what they need to do within guidelines, but that everyone is working for the good of the cause. And out in the community where I work at my university and other places, people ask, why do you get involved with the COA? And that's exactly why. Because they're good people, the good intentions, it's for the good of the cause, and everybody wants to do better. And I think that really begins with the staff, because I don't think we'd be able to operate as a COA without that understanding of level of support. So thank you. No. I know we kind of went down a long discussion, but I'm glad we did this, so it's important to do this. Yeah, absolutely.
I think your comment about having something in the handbook would be really helpful.
Very much so.
I'm not sure what language to put there, but we can give it some thought and work on it. Thank you.
All right. Should we want to go back to the handbook, or do we end with that grand hurrah? Yes, thank you for joining us. So sorry. No worries. Hanging in there? Okay. Well, unless any committee member feel a desire to dig in, or Ms.
No, I had one more
comments?
thing.
Sure.
Because I was just talking with committee member Borges, and she was just asking about your role, Commissioner Rodriguez, and how the commission gets updated or anything. Would you be willing to share a little bit about what you share with the commission based on what you see here? That would be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I don't tell them after the meeting. I give a report during the liaison report. And what I comment on are some of the things that happen, usually, like how many institutions went through the process, came here, right, just like a general summary. And then, so for example, the last meeting that I attended, not the last meeting that you had, we had a, sort of like a parting shot from one of the people who was leaving here, and so I know that some of that was intended for the commission, so I communicated that, and like in this case, that was incredibly articulate, and I will definitely make sure that gets back to the commission. So since I walked in as Katrina was talking, what I'll have to do is I'll have to go back and listen to the live feed.
Commissioner Rodriguez has probably been one of our most active liaisons ever, in that when she's not at the meeting, she actually does listen to your meeting after the fact. And I think you've been really articulate with the commission members about how dedicated and how much work this body does and how seriously they take their decision making. That is something that I think she said multiple times to the commissioners. And so I do think it helps the commission as a body understand your work so much better.
And another thing, I also ensure that, when the CTC, 4 years ago, right, when a lot of this process started and we started redoing the accreditation process. And one of the things, I remember people saying, well, what is the accreditation committee doing as far as holding people accountable? And the direct quote was, we need for it to have teeth. And I've mentioned that here at meetings that, when we have institutions that are coming in and are accredited and perhaps they've deviated from what they're supposed to be doing, I have seen you here ask the right questions and make sure that they are doing what they said they were going to do. And if they're not doing that, then they're held accountable for that. And so I make sure to communicate that to the CTC regularly.
Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Unless there are any further comments you wish to make about the handbook, we can adjourn the meeting. We have public comment as well. Any further discussion on the handbook? I think what I'd like to do, would it be possible to read through the names of those who have stepped up, developed it as part of the subcommittee?
Of Iris Riggs, Cynthia, Kathy, Jose Luis, and Cheryl. Is that
okay? And, okay, that's sufficient.
And
then
backed out in order to let
okay, great.
Cheryl.
And that doesn't mean that if you're not on the committee, you cannot offer your input. That we want everybody's input. It's just a matter of having a subcommittee of trying to, maybe do more of the detailed work, but everybody's comments and everybody's input, as we explained today, and if we experienced today, is very, very useful. So we would appreciate everybody's input.
Great.
All right. Any member of the public wish to make any comment? All right, hearing none and having no further business, I adjourn the March 2019 meeting of the Committee on Accreditation. Next meeting of the committee will be on June 27th, 2019. We'll see you all then. Thank you.
Thank you.